Now the fun begins.
Richard.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and of course, PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, review us, rate us, all that jazz that I tell you every week, wherever you get a podcast at. And follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games alike, and of course our dope giveaways. I'm your host as always, Travis White, aka Travlis, on most internet platforms. Joining me is just myself again. I know I said last week, hey, Mike's going to be on, potentially Adam, we're going to do a Halo Infinite spoiler cast. That is definitely all still in the works. It is going to happen. I promise, next week we go back to normal. But it is Christmas, and it is crazy with travel, so unfortunately, we've just had to make some concessions, and I'm here. So, and I've been thinking, I want to, name these, I don't want to, they're not, check-ins, but they're just, open-form discussions. They're not even, podcast episodes when I host these by myself, because it's just me talking into the void. To be quite honest, it's very therapeutic at times. But, yeah, it's I want to figure out an actual legitimate name for this. I don't know if it's Travlis's Corner or something that sounds fucking lame, but you get what I'm saying. That it's there's something in there that, hey, we're this kind of episode this week, this kind of episode the next week, something like that kind of shakes up the format a little bit. But I don't know. I'll workshop some stuff. But in general, yes, we planned to this week, I'm sorry. We planned this week to be kind of back to normal, but Mike's travel schedule kind of got thrown off a little bit. So he is back in town, but he had stuff with his family and everything like that. So it just kind of didn't work out. But next week we will be back to normal with, everything that's going on. Hopefully going to get Adam on here to talk shop with Halo Infinite. And do a spoiler cast with that now that we've all kind of beaten the game, had our fill with the campaign. I definitely like to sit down, kind of get in the nitty gritty with that. So hopefully that's going to be back next week. That we're going to be back to normal, continuous episodes. We never missed a week, so don't want to start now. But I do like having these kind of impromptu, informal chats that we have. Not that our fucking show is very formal to begin with, but you get my point. So this week it's just going to kind of be us talking again. But it is very interesting because there's a topic that I want to kind of talk through, I guess. But before I get to that, things that I've been playing. Well, now that I'm on vacation for a week and a half or whatever it is, 10 days, I've been playing, and now granted, this is my first day that I'm on vacation. I'm recording Thursday, but I've been playing a lot of Halo Infinite. That has just been my main thing. I've been knee deep, balls deep into Halo Infinite. Playing multiplayer still, obviously. Working my way through Guardians still, in terms of, console games that I'm playing. That's another one I want to make sure I get checked off the list when we're talking of, my backlog that I'm trying to work my way through. But then again, we're playing, Molly and I are watching The Witcher Season 2 right now, and I've gotten back into reading the books, so I'm really yearning to get back into that game. Just jump back into The Witcher 3 and say, fuck it. Also, too, you could tell that my voice is a little raspy, a little bit of a bug, not COVID, but kind of dealing with that. So, unfortunately, if my golden voice isn't up to standards, not that they're very high standards to begin with, I apologize. But anyways, yeah, so mostly on my part, it's just been heavy Halo Infinite. That's pretty much the only game. Now, granted, we did pop in Adam, P-Pack, Kyle and I, when we all had a minute, we all did pop in and We played some Bigfoot the other night. I know we've talked about that before on the show. Easy game for all of us to jump into. And a game that also, too, that we hopped into that I haven't played in forever. Goddamn, I love this game. Golf with Your Friends. God, what a fucking game, man. But yeah, it's one of those games that's just fucking great to get everybody in. Literally, it's just that atmosphere of, hey, we're all bullshitting. We're not taking this super serious. We're all trying these ridiculous hole-in-one attempts and, jumping balls and things like that. Like, it's just great to jump in and actually have another game like that in the arsenal that could just be in our rotation of, yeah, we all don't have to play this at a super high level competitive. It's just something we could all jump in and have a good time with. So we did switch it up a little bit, but yes, I've still been heavily playing Halo Infinite. So yeah, next on my list to get done, though, I'm going to step away from Halo to commit to get something. I want to wrap up Guardians of the Galaxy. Still really enjoying that, but I want to kind of put a cap on that and see that through. Kind of looking through my backlog of other stuff that I want to finish. I still need to technically finish Deathloop. I never completed it. I played a lot of it, but never actually fully completed it. So I do have to go back and finish that. The Forgotten City is another game that I want to play. That I hear I can do in one sitting for the most part. So I played the original mod. I don't think I ever finished the original mod on Skyrim, but I would like to go back and finish that. I'm trying to think what else. I feel like there's something else that I'm like blatantly missing, but there's some other stuff too that I want to jump in that isn't from this year, but stuff like that for Game of the Year discussion and whatnot. Like, I want to get back in and finish that stuff. So in general, it's been, kind of the same old with me, but at the same time too, I do want to get back in. There's a handful of things I would like to get back in and kind of put a bow on. So anywho, though, let's head into, if you want to even call it the big topic of this week, but something I kind of wanted to talk about. So I was listening to Podcast Unlocked. Well, really it was this week's episode of Game Scoop, which was bringing over at IGN's kind of like main gaming podcast, I guess you could say, that is not, console specific, or console manufacturer specific. So there's Podcast Unlocked with PlayStation, or Podcast Unlocked with, for Xbox, that Ryan McCaffrey hosts. There is Podcast Beyond that is hosted by Jonathan Dornbush, which was really the tentpole IGN podcast, if you ask me, that kind of was transformative for a lot of people in my age demographic who grew up on, games media and things like that, with Greg Miller, Colin Moriarty, a whole crew. So it's really, really, and then obviously, oh my God, why am I blanking? Fucking, the Nintendo one. I'm fucking losing my mind right now. Why can I not think of it? It's Nintendo Voice Chat. So yeah, really, this episode this week, anyways, was Game Scoops, which is their non hardware manufacturer specific one, podcast, I should say, that Damon Hatfield, Seth Macy, Ryan McCaffrey, and Jonathan Dornbush were on talking about pretty much the year-end in review. It's pretty much a year-end in review for each console that's out right now. And not to anybody's surprise, obviously, Ryan spoke very highly of Xbox, and rightfully so. Like, not to anybody's surprise, but he's been very much a champion of, I believe, the Xbox's, or Microsoft in general, their strides that they've made, specifically this year, where we're starting to see actual, the fruits of their labor of trying to really make a transformative gaming experience. And I think we're finally getting to see that. I totally agree with him. One thing, though, that was brought up during the discussion that Damon Hatfield brought up, and he brought up, hey, is this Microsoft's, he brought up an op-ed that Ryan McCaffrey wrote in the summer saying, after Microsoft's E3 press briefing or press conference, whatever, showcase, that's what they called it, saying like, Xbox, his opinion article was, Xbox is finally, the excuse of Xbox doesn't have any more games is finally going to start dying. And this is the first year to do that. And I definitely agree with him on that from that basis. But Damon brought up a really interesting thought. And he brought it up saying, while this is Xbox, definitely a stellar year for Xbox, is this Xbox's best year ever? And I thought about that. And on a basis of it, no. I totally agree that from that, no, I don't believe so. When I think of best years on Xbox in general, I think of 2007 instantly. We're talking about, granted, two of the games there were console exclusives at the time, Mass Effect and, of course, Halo 3. But you also had BioShock, you also had Rock Band, which primarily were played on Xbox consoles, or 360 consoles at that time. There were so many major games that came out and surrounded around the Xbox 360. But when we look at this encapsulated, I think it is interesting to think about, because I personally don't agree with it. And Ryan even said too, he was like, no, I wouldn't say that. But I think we're at a point now where we could have a discussion with that. That when we look at this past year, and just in general, really just in general, when we look back through the year that was 2021, and obviously we're going to kind of get deeper into this as we really get into, our year-end discussion, game of the year, things like that. But just kind of looking through some of the games that came out this year, you had a lot of ports that came over and things like that, surrounded, or I should say next-gen re-releases, things like that. But when you look at the two big tentpole franchise games that came out this year for Xbox, specifically for Microsoft on the Xbox platforms, hell, I would even say, and potentially 3 that didn't even come out on Xbox, you have Halo Infinite, which is definitely a return to form for the franchise alone, but also to finally, I think, 343 making the Halo game that they've wanted to and have been trying to, and finally put a lot of things to the side buried a lot of things that should have been left behind, and finally focused on creating a core Halo experience. I think we finally got that. The campaign, in my opinion, was excellent, kind of in our review in progress. You can go back and listen to that. There are some issues that I have, and we're going to talk about them in the spoiler cast. Adam and I have had really good conversations about a lot of, meeting our expectations in a lot of ways, but falling flat in a lot of other ways. So we'll get into that, obviously. But also on top of that, too, Forza Horizon 5, and this year being the year that finally we're starting to see some true acclaim, and not that we haven't in the past for the Horizon subset, but finally it feels like almost this stigma has broken away of, Forza Horizon 5 can't be the best game of the year because it's a racing game. Well, IGN just gave it their game of the year. And I think that was really important to finally get, because I personally feel like, even though racing games necessarily aren't my thing, I definitely believe that Forza Horizon 5 deserved to be in Game of the Year discussions. I truly believe that when we're looking at Game of the Year at the Game Awards, there's very, very, very much a case to have Forza Horizon 5 listed. Do I think it's my Game of the Year? No. I don't, personally, because it's just not my thing. But the fact that it isn't even in the conversation because it's a racing game to me, that is an archaic look at, I guess, games in their position in the market. But in general, too, you start looking around the rest of the year for Xbox. We have finally the long-awaited Psychonauts 2 that came out, blew, expectations out of the water. People loved it. Obviously, though, is still technically a multi-platform release coming out on PlayStation 4 as well. But at the same time, though, this is an Xbox title. This is an Xbox Game Studios title coming from Double Fine, Tim Schafer, the whole history with that. But two, in addition to that, what I think a lot of people aren't going to necessarily bring up because it is very intrinsically tied to the PlayStation 5 is Deathloop. That's clearly an Xbox Game Studios title now under the banner of Arcane that isn't even on Xbox and a potential game of the year. And I truly believe that it is absolutely should be in the conversation because it's an excellent game. So it's really interesting when you think about kind of mapping out this year that we're in a position now that you could at least have a discussion around the thought of, hey, maybe this is game of the year. Or not game of the year. Hey, maybe this is Xbox's best year. We're finally starting to see some strides with, consoles slowly starting to get into more people's hands. We're finally starting to see a lot of promises in terms of specific titles, getting next-gen upgrades, things like that. And COVID is to blame for a vast majority of that. But even then, we're finally starting to get the full extent of this console. And slowly, we're only going to get better with that. So when you think about really the full-fledged outlook of Xbox this year, there's a discussion to be had. I personally still don't think it is Xbox's strongest year, but if we're talking since the 360, is this Xbox's strongest year? Yeah, I think we're damn near close, if not. And really, what do you compare it to? 2013 came out and was really a dud that year. The launch was a dud that year. Tried to, refocus and retool in 2014, got rid of the Kinect. The launch of Master Chief Collection, which is an absolutely fucking incredible platform right now, and game and ecosystem to get into now, was very, very, very hampered with issues at launch in so many ways on the multiplayer end. Not to mention which is now a cult, I would almost call it a cult classic, but Insomniac really, while not financially supported by PlayStation in the way of they own them, or Sony in general, going away from their long-running partnership with Sony and working pretty much exclusively with Sony on the console, in terms of, software in the console market, going away and saying, hey, we're doing a game with Microsoft right now, doing an Xbox exclusive that is Sunset Overdrive. And, a lot of people loved it, and me personally really enjoyed that game, and you could see so much of the DNA in that game that made its way into Spider-Man, and why Insomniac's a perfect choice for that as a studio to take that IP. But I'm getting ahead of myself on that part. But really looking around elsewhere, the following year, you're getting, Halo 5 coming out, and obviously we know the issues surrounding the campaign with that. Multiplayer was still fun for a lot of people, but it wasn't necessarily a Halo experience again. 2016, Gears 4, 2017, what was 2017? Holy shit. Sea of Thieves was 2018, but even then, Sea of Thieves struggled, to say the least. And really, when we got into that, 2016-17 range is when we started hearing and started seeing, hey, we're in a drought for games. But then we look at something like 2018, you get the announcement of Halo Infinite, you get the announcement of Gears 5, you get the announcement of purchasing studios like, Playdead and Playground and Ninja Theory, and you start to see these pieces start to really ratchet and move up. That you start to see the full picture of what the future of Xbox is, and that gets you excited. And from that perspective, yeah, you have a lot of noise there. Same with 2019, and then obviously 2020 with the launch of the Xbox Series X and S. There's a lot to be excited about, but I think this is the first year that we could actually look at Xbox's lineup, what Xbox brought out, released, supported, everything from that end, that this might be Xbox's strongest year. And it's definitely I personally think the strongest year for sure since the release of the Xbox One. And that's not even, since the sunset of the Xbox 360. How about that? So it's really crazy to think about that we're at this position now that, this is the biggest year of Xbox in they're really not even peaking yet. And that's super exciting for, people like me who cover it from a media perspective, people like me who also are trying to eventually work in game development and use some of this hardware that is now starting to fully get, people are starting to kind of dig their claws into this thing and get into the meat and bones of this hardware to develop on. And not to mention just somebody as a fan who is excited to play more games on my Xbox, excited to continue to live in that PC and Xbox ecosystem. Who still plays the Switch and his PS5 as well, but you get the point where I'm excited to continue to use this hardware a lot. And that even kind of makes me want to look forward into kind of 2022, because we're going to have a lot of big questions that need answered in 2022 when we talk of Xbox. Because if we thought this year was big, next year could be just as big, if not bigger. And that's the things we don't even know about too. So kind of like rolling through here, we kind of want to focus on, and I'm kind of just looking through the schedule that we have here. And obviously a lot of stuff hasn't completely gotten hard dates or anything like that. Obviously the big one, Starfield. This is the first new title from Bethesda Game Studios, Bethesda proper, if you want to. I like to look at, this is the studio that brought you The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and this is their first new IP in 25 years, or 25 plus years. So this is a very, very unique moment for them that I think people are going to be blown away by this game. I think this game has the ability to really cement now the future of Xbox in terms of being the home of Western RPGs, because very, very soon we're going to get, I shouldn't say very, very soon. Within the near future, we're going to then get Fable. We're then going to eventually get The Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, it's going to happen at some point. And then after that, we're going to see more supported titles like Avowed from Obsidian. And obviously, like we saw this past year at the Xbox Game Showcase for E3, that we're going to see, The Outer Worlds 2. So there's more and more coming for that. But looking else on top of that, I know we're going to have, what's the game from? That's going to kill me. No, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Oh, that's going to bug me, guys. That's going to bug me. Contraband. Yeah, Contraband. That's right. That's definitely coming in, being an Xbox exclusive, coming supposedly in 2022. So we're going to see a lot of really, really interesting stuff that's coming out. And I'm really excited to see kind of what the future is, because I think personally, we really, really, really could see the tide start to turn next year for Xbox. I'm putting that out there. Me personally, is it going to happen? Is it confirmed? No. But when we look at the year that PlayStation had this year, and I played a ton on my PS5 too, on top of playing a ton on my Xbox Series X. To me, though, this year was very much a quiet year for Sony. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart came out, which I thought was a fucking fantastic game. Absolutely adored it. I didn't play Returnal, but I know on top of that, a lot of people love that game, but also was very niche, considering it is a roguelite for the most part, and the issues with saving and the difficulty that was involved with that. It speaks to a very specific audience that, to me, it seems more like you're not going to get, you've never gotten the mainstream appeal of that. But we saw a lot of ports and next gen upgrades, I guess, if you want to call them that, when it comes to the PlayStation 5 and also on Xbox too. But that was primarily, we saw Death Stranding Director's Cut. We saw Final Fantasy VII Remake integrated, things like that we've seen from them. But On top of that, though, we're still seeing, like, we're going to see more stuff come out from them. We're going to see, there was, I guess what I should say, there wasn't that, wow, I need to grab this, I need to play this, I need to make sure I experience this game with PlayStation this year. That's a little different for Microsoft for once in the conversation. For the first time in a long time, I guess I should say. That we're having that conversation around Forza Horizon 5, around Halo Infinite, around, well, Death's Door is now on, multiple platforms, but was a timed exclusive for Xbox for a while. And people were talking in that fashion like they did for a lot of other experiences. So, a lot of big, large-scale experiences, I should say. So, to me, this is the time that we could potentially see a shift really into, hey, we're going to see Xbox potentially make that leap that we've been hoping to see and what we've been planning to see. Oh, not on top of that, I knew the game that I was thinking of. I was thinking of Contraband as well, but fucking Redfall from Arcane Studios, another Xbox exclusive that's going to be coming out. So we're in a really, really good place right now with Xbox that this could potentially be what we really, as a fan, would want to see, and as somebody who follows, Xbox from a media perspective, has been hearing about for how many years now of, hey, this is buy into the system, or not system, buy into our ecosystem because we're buying into you as a gamer in terms of the software. We're buying studios, we're buying developers, we're supporting games that maybe didn't have support previously that have been fan favorites and that our fans are listening to. This is the time where we're finally getting to see that potentially pay off, and I'm super excited. But I'd like to get everyone's kind of thoughts on that, because this is, like I said, this is more open-ended. It's late. I'm sure I'm stumbling through a lot of this, but I thought it was a really good podcast earlier that it was good to think about, because I think for the first time, this is the one time in a long time you could actually say, hey, this is potentially, it may not be, but let's at least have a conversation about it. There's actual some backing that will come from it. So saying that this could potentially be the best year of Xbox. So that's kind of all I have for you guys. I know it's kind of long-winded, and not at the same time super long, which is kind of, hypocritical and oxymoron. But anyways, it's just kind of like I said, something to think about that I've been thinking about today, and kind of pondering over, like, well, fuck, maybe this is the year. So what do you guys think? I'm curious to hear what you think in the comments and in the reviews and all that jazz on Twitter. You can always get a hold of us. Like I said, Adam, Mike and I will be back next week. Mike and I, for sure, we're hopefully going to have Adam on to talk Halo Infinite, get his thoughts on it, and kind of put a bow on the Halo Infinite experience. In terms of at least us covering it as a, main point. But I wanted to make sure we all finished it or all had a great, understanding of the narrative, the plot, all that. So it's looking like next week's going to be the week to do that. And then on top of it, obviously, Christmas and holidays and New Year's and yada, yada. It's just crazy right now. So with that being said, I think that's going to do it for our episode this week. I'm your host, as always, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms, including at Travelus _ on Twitter. That's TRAVLESS_. You can also find me streaming time to time on twitch.tv/Travelus_, same as Twitter. And if you want to play some video games with me, you can do so over on Xbox Live at just regular old Travelus. That's TRAVLESS. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has been your newest episode of the Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox Game Pass, and of course PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz. The whole rigmarole that I give you every week, wherever you get a podcast at. And follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like it, our dope giveaways. And with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for episode this week. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate. happy holidays to everyone else. This is a great time of year, but it's also a time of year that it can be very hard for a lot of people. So please keep that in mind too. Reach out to loved ones, reach out to friends you haven't talked to in a while. There are probably people fighting some battles that you don't know about that could really use that. So be sure to spread love and positivity and reach out to people and just check in with people. This is a great time of year, but it could be a hard time of year for a lot of people. So that's my words of wisdom for this week, I guess. But anyways, we'll be back to normal next week. I promise. Mike and I at least will be on the show. We'll be going over a lot of stuff. We'll be getting ready for Game of the Year. We'll be back to normal next week. I promise. Then we're no more craziness, no more crazy travel and everything being messed up. So that's going to be it for our episode. I'm like falling asleep. That's going to be it for our episode this week. Thank you everyone so much for listening, sharing, and being a part of our growing community. Game on, wash your hands, listen to the doctors, Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.